Hello and welcome to our little box of knitting Dancing Leaf Shawl by Helen Elizabeth Birch. This is a lovely project and deceptively simple. I know it's a very sort of striking design, but it's deceptively simple. A couple of techniques in here that I'd like to talk you through. Short rows. So I know short rows are tricky or sort of scary maybe for some people, but it's really fine. We're going to go through that together. So we'll go through the wraps and turns and picking up the wraps and all that kind of thing. And the only other thing that I think might be useful to look at is twisting the yarns together. When you're working with two yarns, sort of twisting them together at the ends of the row so that you don't get any gap between the end of one yarn and the beginning of the other yarn. So on this shawl, as an example, the contrast colour forms a sort of spiral border all the way along the shawl, and you need to make a nice continuity between that contrast colour and the main colour. So just a couple of techniques to show you. There's a lot of garter stitch in here, so it's a nice knit, nice and relaxing, with some lovely interest with those contrast leaves. So without any more preamble, let's crack on. Okay, just addressing the elephant in the room. This is not the yarn that you will be working with. This is not the needle that you'll be working with. I'm just using these for the purposes of the video. Our yarn delivery is not, hasn't happened yet, but it's really not a problem. All I wanted was some high contrast yarn to show you, you know, how things will turn out. So I'm going to be using this light colour as the contrast yarn and the darker colour for the main yarn. So I'm going to start by showing you how to make one of the leaves. Right, starting with the first leaf, we're going to start with a cast on, and I tend to always go to slingshot cast on just because it's quick and easy. Any cast on will do. It doesn't have to be stretchy or anything, this one, but if you'd like to see a sort of long tail slingshot cast on, this is it. So I've just sort of kept enough back off the end to make the number of stitches that I need, and I've got the end coming underneath the needle and the working yarn going off the top of the needle, and I'm just going to hold those two ends together like so and tension them by putting my finger and thumb between like that, so it's nice and taut. So I'm going to take my needle under the thumb and over the top and pull, under the thumb, over the top and pull, under the thumb, over the top. That's a nice way to remember, under the thumb and over the top. Those are two sort of well-known sayings, aren't they? And they help me with my slingshot cast on. Right, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and 12, I think. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and 12. Okay, so we're now ready to make a start on the actual first leaf. And knit front and back. That's a fairly standard increase, but just in case you're not sure about it, this is what knit front and back looks like. It's exactly as the name suggests. I'm putting my needle in the first stitch as if to knit, knitting it but not pulling it off the needle, and now I'm going to go into the back, okay, of the stitch and knit it again, wrap and pull through, and you can see I've now made 2 stitches where there were 1, and that's coming off the needle. We're now going to knit across to the other end and repeat that at the other end. So I've got 10 stitches to knit across here. You'll be told in the pattern how many stitches to knit before your next increase. So I'm looking here at knitting 10 till I get to the end. I've split the yarn. I always seem to select a splitty yarn to demo with. I never learn. Right, so that was 10, and here is my last stitch. So I'm going to repeat that. So needle in as if to knit, wrap the yarn, pull through but don't pull off the needle, knit into the back of the stitch, wrap the yarn, pull through and pull off the needle. So we've now got 14 stitches, hopefully. Let's count: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 14. Right, so that was row 1, that was the right side row, and we're now going to do the wrong side row. And here on the wrong side row is where the wrap and turns happen. So let's look at how to do a wrap and turn. So again, your pattern will tell you how many stitches to knit before you do the wrap and turn, and in this case it is 6. 2, 4, 6, and I'm actually using sort of short circular needles here just because of the video. So again, don't worry that your needles will be different. Right, so I've knit 6 and I'm now going to wrap the next stitch. And again, wrapping and turning, that is exactly as it sounds. I'm going to wrap this stitch and then turn the work. What it means is I don't work all the way across the row. I'm just working sort of the early parts of the row backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So that will leave the later part sort of unworked and create a shape. And you'll see that as we work through it. So to wrap and turn, I'm here as if to knit, but I want to make a collar almost around this next stitch. And how I'm going to do that, I'm going to bring my yarn through the needles to the front. I'm going to slip this next stitch over onto my right needle. I'm going to take the yarn back to the back, and you can see it's created this little collar here around the stitch. And when I take that, I'm then going to take that stitch back onto the left needle and bring the yarn back to the front. And if you look closely, you can see there is a little wrap going all the way around that stitch. We've circled the yarn with that. That's the wrap, and here is the turn. It is literally turning the work. Okay, so the turn is considerably easier than the wrap. And we are now ready to kind of carry on our rows. You can see there's the wrap going around the stitch. Okay, and the working yarn is back at the back. So that was row 2. I'm going to knit now to the last stitch and knit front and back. So we know how to knit front and back. Knit into the front, work through, don't take it off the needle, knit into the back, wrap, work through, and now take it off the needle. And you can see there's 2 stitches sitting there where there was one before. Okay, so that was our row 3, and we should now have 15 stitches. I'm going to double check, make sure we're on track. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 and 15. Yes, what you will notice where I've wrapped that stitch, it's created a gap. So it's very easy to see where the wrap stitch sits, because you generally have this kind of this gap between them. What's going to happen now is I'm going to work through, and you will see that as I work, I'm now going on to row 4. If you look at your pattern, row 4, row 6, row 8, row 10 are all this knit 6 and wrap and turn. Okay, they're all exactly the same, but because we've made extra stitches at the end, the number of stitches you're going to have to knit back to, this way, the number of stitches you're going to have to knit back to just gets bigger each time. So if I just do my 6 and wrap and turn again, you'll see what I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And where that's brought me, it's brought me to the stitch before the one that we wrapped. All right, because we've made the front, and we knit front and back up this end, we've created another stitch. So we've worked to one stitch before the wrapped stitch from the last row. So if I bring my yarn forward as before, slip that stitch onto the right needle, wrap it, slip it back and bring the yarn back through, and then turn the work. Okay, so now I'm going to knit the end and do that knit front and back again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, knit front and back. Okay, So you can see what's happening. We're creating a new stitch each time, which gives us space to work 6 and then wrap a stitch. I'm going to do this a couple more times so you can see the effect that it has on the knitting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and again you'll see it brings me to just before the last wrapped stitch. So I'll go ahead and do that wrap. Okay, and I will knit back and knit front and back. So I'm going to do this 2 or 3 more times and you'll see the shape of the leaf starting to form. Actually, you can already see it there, can't you? So what's the effect that's being had here is, as we're only working these sort of early stitches, and mainly this part, because our stitches up this end are getting made each time, this section is getting worked a lot more than the end, and this end isn't getting worked at all. So you've got a completely flat section and then this lovely sort of bulbous section where we've worked backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And like I said, you can already see, can't you, the shape of that leaf starting to come through. So I'm just going to carry on following the pattern, which is knitting 6, wrapping and turning, knitting to the end and knit front and back. I'm going to keep doing that until I get to row 12, and row 12 is where it all changes. So I'll see you back at row 12.